So hi everyone, my name is Uzair. I am part of FAANA board, which is Fast Alumni Association of North America, and we are here today to conduct a webinar on open source software development, which is going to be our ninth webinar on this series. But before I jump onto the webinar, I would like to quickly introduce you all to what FAST Alumni Association is and what we are doing. So, I hope you can see my screen. Anybody?
Yes, I can see your screen.
So just a quick intro of what we do. We are obviously we are FAST Alumni Association of North America, and we generate some donations on behalf of FAANA to help the current students at all the FAANA, all the FAST campuses. We have a scholarship fund, and we have a research innovation fund. Scholarship fund obviously helps the current needy and capable students to complete their studies on time. And then we have a research innovation fund, which basically is an initiative to start off research activities across various FAST campuses. Um, what we did in 2019, we had 3 new board members join the team. We created various channels across various cities for FAST alumni to locally engage. And then we had 30% increase of year-over-year support to partially 6 million rupees. And we had a doubling of number of individual donors using micro campaigns on social media platform like WhatsApp and Facebook. We had 7 webinars conducted last year. All of them are uploaded to our YouTube channel and are available on our website as well. I will show you guys a quick link uh, to that later on. And for the fact this webinar is also going to be uploaded, so you can also always go back to our website and refer it back. Last year, the donations that we collected were around $43,000, and they were distributed among different forms, like mentioned on the previous slide, as the student scholarship and the in the innovation fund. So we closely work with the for the distribution of these funds. We closely work with the campuses and their administration to point out and to figure out the right needs of the campus and the students. What is our focus for 2020? We are basically targeting 70K for this year for raising the money. We were planning, some meetups in Bay Area and in New York, New Jersey areas to increase the local engagement, but obviously due to the current prevailing situation, that's a little bit on hold. But hopefully, once things turn out for good, we will resume with that. We are also looking to increase the establishment of local chapters. There's another interesting project that we are initiating this year is kind of industry university collaboration on carrying out the final year projects, where we our industry alumni would take out the uh, like projects from the industry and take them to the campuses and work with the FYP coordinators and supervisors, and work along with them to carry out the projects, so that the projects that the students are doing are just don't really just go into the waste. Rather, they have like their impact on the industry, and it helps them figure out their career path later on. And then obviously our main focus stays on the webinars as well to increase the engagement. That's quick, graph showing our performance across the 5 campuses. We also supported 5 different software competitions. And you can also see the breakdown of scholarship fund and the research fund, how it's being distributed across various campuses. Lastly, these are all our channels across various social media. We obviously have our own website, faana.org, and we have a WhatsApp group as well for North American alumni. Then we have our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at board@faana.org. And then we have a LinkedIn group and a Facebook group where we are pretty active. So especially for the upcoming students and people who are looking to complete their undergraduate studies and looking to move to US, if they have any questions, they are more than welcome to reach out to us, and we would be, happy to guide you as much as we can, and then try to direct you in a way where you can get more information on that. So let me move on to my next stuff. All right. So now we are on the faana.org. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of our website. So we have obviously the homepage. You can go to check out our work, and then under what's new is the compilation of our all the webinars that we give out. So you can always go to our website and look for it. Like I said, today is our 9th session of our webinar series, which is going to be the intro to open source. And we would be covering about what the open source basics are and what the open source development model comprises of. Then there's a whole list of things which I think would be more suitable once we actually start the webinar. But before that, I would like to introduce our speaker who has taken out time from his busy schedule and had agreed to graciously accept this invite to be the speaker. And so Khalid bhai, we really appreciate that. Just before we get into the webinar, just to give a quick background, Khalid bhai is the director of portfolio solutions marketing at Red Hat, and he coordinates marketing, evangelism, and consulting activities at Red Hat. He is also helping customers address application development and integration challenges in today's world. And then is also working closely to ensure that the next generation of Red Hat technology meets the customer requirements. He has 25 plus years of experience in the IT industry and does a lot of application development, integration, business intelligence, and data management. And his work also expands across financial services, banking, and telecommunication. So thank you once again, Khalid bhai, for joining us and being able to guide the younger generation about what opportunities lie for them in open source development. With that being said, I will stop sharing my screen once again, and I will be passing over the ball to you.
Okay. Thank you, Ahmed.
I just made you the host, so you should be able to. Yes. Be able to share your screen.
Yes, I'm sharing my screen, and hopefully you guys can.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, wherever you are joining from. Thanks for joining this webinar. Hopefully you will find it useful. As was introduced, I work at Red Hat. I have been, my entire 25 plus years of career has been spent in software, working within the software industry. So I've always worked for vendor. Out of college, I started out in software support. I have done from there, went to software development, to product management, to now in marketing and sales area. So I've done almost every role within the software industry itself and seen it change over the years. How proprietary software was the only way, and now it has been changed to open sources penetrated every industry, and it has actually compelled the giants of the industry like Microsoft to adopt open source now. So with that, what we will do is our agenda is brief introduction to open source. I know I have a very diverse audience here. Some of you are very experienced, know it very well. Some might not know it very well. So I will just make sure that we all are on the same page. Define what open source is, what is the technology, how can you participate and contribute and join the community. So so if you don't know, let's start with what's source code. Source code, if you think about when we develop programs, we write them in another language, we write them in C or Java or Python. And then basically we compile the code. Most of the time when we are using the code from a vendor, it usually comes in form of binary. So think about that. Like we all use Microsoft Office. Well, somebody wrote the code, then Microsoft compiles the code, creates a binary, and then you install that binary on your computer, and then basically you use the software. So that's a basic, right? Now we started sharing code. Before it was a company will own the code, that's their IP, that's their trade secret, and they will not share the code. But with the start of Linux, actually even before that, it started back in 60s and 70s, in early days of computer, people will share code, the programs that they write with each other to help each other out. And that's how they actually used to debug and all those things. They would improve their software and things like that. But then when the business model started, that's when patent law and IP protection and everything comes into play. So in any case, the idea is that a developer or somebody who will write the code, he will share the code with the world, and people will use that code, compile it, and you will use the code and will use the software. Now, when you share the code, some people may actually change some of the code, right? So if you think about, like, I'm just using the hello world example. Somebody wrote, this is the original code. Somebody changed hello world to WhatsApp. Somebody, another person, another developer change it to bonjour. Now, when you use that version of code, you are going to get different output or different behavior. So the idea is we sell the binaries with support. So one of the key things with open source is that you write the code and you create the binaries. Usually the business is selling the binaries. You're basically selling a pre-compiled piece of code, and they usually with support, and that's what they are getting, and they can use that binary to then build solutions or their own applications. That is the basic business model of open source. However, the best part about proprietary software versus open source is when you actually subscribe or license the binaries, you also get access to the source code. So you can actually look at the code that actually is running the application that you have, the binaries for which you have bought. So that's what open source is basically essentially the source code is available. The community or the developers in the community can improve it, can make it better, and that's where and they can actually if they make the changes in the source code, they can actually pass it on to the upstream, and I'm going to define what upstream and downstream really means, um, and that becomes part of the original source code. So not only over time you will see the original source code, but also you see how it was improved and how people made additional feature improvements or feature enhancements, things like that. So that, in a nutshell, is the introduction to open source. So open source is based essentially when you have the freedom to look at the code that you're using as binary, and you can actually improve that code. You can actually change that code, and you can,
Sir, can you speed up a little bit? It seems so slow, sir.
okay, I'll speed up fast. So basic principle is you should be able to run, study, share, and improve the software that you're using. So open source software uses open source principles. Source code is available with the license developed by the user community. So it's more than one person that has, or one organization that has developed it. Mostly free, except charges for support. So most of the open source business model is based on charging, subscription fee for providing the support for patches, for security updates, things like that. Now, in terms of licensing, licensing is very crucial. Licensing creates the community because licensing controls how people can change the code, modify the code, add to the code, how contributions are handled, who's going to be the decision maker in figuring out what piece of code to accept and not, and determines the business laws around around what features are available and not available. How are you going to create a business? Because software is free. Remember, it's a source code is available. You can compile it and run it on your own. The licensing model actually kind of defines, because it's not just one piece of code. You most probably will use multiple other pieces of software within another software. And licensing should be easy. If it's too complicated, nobody will really understand it. This is in a spectrum of licenses that fall under, not just open source, but all software. But you can think about the two main groups of open source software that is being used. One is permissive, which is pretty much, it is the most non-restrictive, anything goes kind of terms and conditions. Anybody can download the code, and then they can actually use that code to build up proprietary software. The permissive license actually allows you to do that, whereas the other category, the weak, the copyleft category, actually puts restrictions. It basically expects that if you're going to use an open source software, that if you make an addition or make changes to it, you are going to contribute back to the community, and you're not going to make it proprietary. You're not going to close source your piece of software if you're using an open source software. So that's the two major groups of licenses. You can get more details. I've added the link here with that. So at Red Hat, we are one of the major, and I think very unique open source vendor. We are very successful software vendor that have actually found a way to monetize or create a whole business around open source technology. And that's why a lot of people were surprised when recently, last year, IBM paid $34 billion to buy us. Yet all our software is available for free. So why did they buy us? That's a separate topic. That's a separate issue. But that tells us a story. So in terms of technology, you will hear the terms upstream. Usually that means it's a project. It's basically managed by a community. And downstream, that's usually the binaries. That means some vendor have taken several upstream projects and then created a integrated them and curated them and created a full specific area or provide a specific solution. Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is the downstream product, and Fedora is the upstream Linux project. So Fedora is completely, completely community driven, whereas Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we go through the whole testing and providing a long-term support, so that because upstream projects change very fast. Usually there are new features added, and most of the new features, upstreams are not obliged to make it backward compatible. Whereas downstream projects, because that's what most of the people are buying, they want stability for long term. They want
Can you
certification.
describe upstream and downstream in a layman words so that the normal person can understand easily? Because I'm having difficulty in understanding what is upstream and downstream.
Okay,
Can you tell me your name? Who just asked this question, please? Okay, so yeah, I think I would appreciate if everybody keeps their questions for the end of the session, so that it doesn't break the flow of the speaker. So really appreciate your cooperation on that. Thank you.
So upstream is LibreOffice, GNOME project, even Linux is upstream. You can actually change now. So basically anything OpenStack project is also upstream, whereas then people take us, and there are several things that they upstreams don't usually certify with a specific hardware. Like Red Hat Enterprise Linux is certified on certain on certain hardware platforms, HP servers and IBM servers and things like that. And so if you are running Red Hat Enterprise Linux on those hardware platforms, Red Hat will support you on those platforms. Upstreams don't have those certifications. You are responsible. So it's the same piece of software, but the supportability comes whether are you going to own the support, or basically is a vendor going to own the support. That's a key difference between upstream and downstream. Upstream, you are actually going to be responsible for maintaining and managing, and if anything goes wrong with that piece of code, you are responsible for. Whereas downstream is basically a vendor has taken the upstream code, and they have done the testing, they have certified it, they make sure that if new features are being added, that it does not break any backward compatibility, that old programs can still run on the new version of software. All that work is basically downstream, and that's what you buy. You buy the support, basically, essentially support of that piece of code. So in terms of the piece of code, is the same piece of code, but the support responsibility is different. If it's downstream, it's supported by a vendor. If it's upstream, it's supported by the user who is downloading this piece of software. So hopefully that answers your question. And remember, so you can create downstream projects, that several downstream projects together can form the upstream for another. So to give you an example, Linux, for example, it is one piece of code, but then Red Hat Enterprise Linux also include upstream projects about networking, about storage, and about productivity software and things like that. And it basically aggregates all of that and makes sure that all those things work on specific hardwares and on specific platforms and specific versions. And they create a downstream project from that. So upstream can be one of the projects of the downstream project. So hopefully that clarifies and answers your question. So essentially, we at Red Hat, we participate, there's a million plus upstream projects. Several people have started. Anybody can start a project. They can say, okay, this is a piece of code and I'm going to share that piece of code. Then people combine these separate projects into communities. The JBoss communities has very rich. It is a combination of multiple projects. CoreOS, OpenShift, OKD, which is OpenShift Kubernetes distribution, is also one of those projects. Cluster, Ceph, there's a lot of upstream communities. And then those projects get stabilized, they get certified, tested against specific environments, and that's where those projects get turned into products. So that's another way to look at it. Upstreams, downstream is basically when the certification is being done, testing has been done, and it's being supported by a specific organization. So in terms of Red Hat, even though we are predominantly known for Linux, but we have several other other businesses. And in fact, this is a great website. If you have never been here, opensource.com, you'll find lots of articles, lots of projects, what is open source, definition, everything that you need to know. What are the different projects and applications available? If you want to go, oh, I'm interested in open source project management tools. Well, what are the top 5 open upstream projects available? What is the open source ERP systems? So whatever field you're interested in, you can actually find information there. You also can find information about what are the different organizations. So if you want to get involved, if you want to get started in this area, there's several software foundations, all of them, and then that's another way to figure out, where are you going to do that? And I'm going to talk about that as well in further slides. So let me continue with my presentation. So in terms of technology, the idea is, and that's one of the key differences between different business models, that with Red Hat, we actually, whatever we are writing or we are adding or we are fixing in the code, we actually contribute that to upstream first. That means we will not productize any piece of code that has not been made available to general public in terms of source code to upstream. So we will make sure that whatever we are doing, that includes documentation, translation, and everything. We'll make all of that available for the community, and then we actually ship the product with it. It takes more time, but it is more secure, and that way more eyes are on it. More people can actually feel like Red Hat is listening to us. If they are making enhancement requests, if they are making feature requests, we are listening, we are actually adopting, and then we are sharing the output with them. Now, in terms of contribution, participation, let's shift the focus. Typically, you're going to see three major roles. Sorry? roles. Community members is individuals who uses the software to create business solution. You are using Camel, or you using JBoss, are using Fedora to create your own OS, and or using the software to create business solution. Committers are usually the individuals, or one individual or more than one individual usually, who is able to modify the source code. That means they know how the software works. They really understand they're pretty good programmers. They know exactly how things work, and they have used it in real business solution, applying that piece of software to create business solution, and they find out the gaps, the some lack of features, things like that, and they are then able to actually modify the source code and do in the open source software. Maintainers, this is the highest level. One of the most famous maintainers is Linus Cresswald. He's the guy who actually maintains Linux software. So these guys are usually one or more people who drive the vision, and they manage the organizational aspect of the project. They build source code into binary packages, distribution, commit package, which suggestions to accept, what to reject, how to do code quality review, and things like that. These guys are the true, they are the top level people. So usually people start at the community member, and then as they gain experience with the piece of software, then they, and if they are good programmers, then they go into coder, committer type of role. And then, if you're really good at it, then you can join the maintainer team as well. Now, in terms of community, you can create communities for upstream projects. There's a community for Fedora. There's a community for downstream project. There's a user group for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or OpenShift, or JBoss, or Enterprise Application Server, things like that. You have communities for specific roles, like user group for developers, user group for end users, user group of designers who are more interested in creating the UI interfaces to the servers technologies and things like that. And then basically any topic where people share knowledge and how to best use this piece of software. So that's what makes the communities. Usually communities, there is email list, there's IRC channels, there are is there. Now, one of the most frequent questions that I get asked is, how do I get started? Okay, I'm very interested. How do I get started? First of all, you need to figure out what's your interest, what's your expertise, because if you are not an expert in some areas, then or what's your interest, then focus on that. There's, like I said, there's a million projects out there. What do you are more interested in? Are you interested in database management? Are you interested in application servers? Are you interested in operating systems? Whatever you're interested in. So you can figure out, and this is where I've provided links, and you guys most probably will have this presentation. You can explore in GitHub, what are the top 5 projects. I already showed you on opensource.com. You can find out what are the top 5 LDAP open source project, what are the top 5 application server projects, things like that. There's a lot of good resources here about how to get started. Most probably you want to actually, if you don't have a GitHub account on your own, you should create one. I literally started with my GitHub account, and I posted my resume there, not even a code. I posted my resume, and I basically maintain multiple versions of my resume for different jobs. So I'm just giving you that GitHub can be used for anything, for documentation, for code, for anything. But that's the first way, because that's where most of these projects share their code through GitHub. So there are some good resources available here. you guys, they are all linkable. So you can go there, you can go like open source software projects and things like that here. Now, contribution is just not about code. You don't have to be the developer to basically be a contributor in open source. You can become a tester. You can write documentations. Remember, developers, documentation is one of the hated activities of developers. They don't like to document their own thing. So if you're a good writer, and you can use the software, and you read the documentation, how to use the software, and you find that it's really crappy, you can improve the documentation. You can improve how explaining how features work, things like that. You can build a community, find like-minded people who are interested in the particular technology, in the particular area, create a user group, create meetings, meetups, things like that, share best practices, things like that. That's how you can build a community. You know, code is usually written as usually by default is in English.
Please,
But
everyone mute their voice
you're interested in
audio.
making internationalizing or localizing the piece of software, you can do that. Help with the bug triage. So if once you actually start getting familiar with the source code and things like that, and you start using the software and you gain experience with the software, guess what? You will find bugs, and then you can actually figure out how to report the bugs, how to advocate for your bug so that it becomes high priority. Because when people are writing software and they are thinking about fixing the bugs, they will prioritize which bugs to fix first and which bugs to not fix in this next upcoming release. They will create a roadmap. So you can help if you believe very strongly about what you are doing, what the bugs you found, then yeah, advocate for that. Suggest new features and help with the design. So if you are interested in, okay, Linux is great, but I want to create a management screen that actually makes the job of a system admin really, really easy. He doesn't have to know all the commands and memorize all the commands. You want to write a user interface, then you can do that. That's great. So the whole idea is contribution is just not about code. It's not just about developers either. Anybody can actually participate. So why should you contribute? What are the opportunities? Number one, it's about you. You want to you want to build a reputation that you are an expert in Kubernetes, or you're an expert in Linux, and you are so good at, such a great expert that people know about it, that you are providing feedback to the development teams, and you are actually helping them debug piece of code, things like that. So it really makes you a very valuable resource. You can use that to gain employment, or you can use it to start your own business, services, consulting business, open source. Nowadays, a lot of people who are tired of paying very high licensing fee for proprietary software are looking to open source, and they're finding alternatives to a proprietary software in open source. And people who have the expertise, who can help businesses with services and consulting, then they are highly useful. These two are the most, I think, lucrative. You can also go into your own business. You create a whole software business with is a very, very tough job. You must understand licensing really well. And then it's not easy to sell a business software which is actually available for free. So it is high reward, but it's also high risk and things like that. So those are the three main opportunities why you should be thinking about learning and engaging in the open source community. So in terms of resources, I am giving you a lot of resources here, links to it. These are different things that people you can find out more about licensing type if you understand how to get started. What is it to understand all the details in there. So with that, that's the end. And if there are any more questions, that where did I go? I think I started. I clicked on something. So with that, I really appreciate your time. Hopefully this was a good, fast introduction. And I will look for questions now. If there's any questions, Ahmed or Wasif, that are not answered, that you think are the top questions, please let me know.
Yeah, I think we have some. I've asked the participants to ask the question in the chat box. So before I go to those questions, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way? Do you prefer like by email or like LinkedIn or?
Oh, for me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I can be, I'm on LinkedIn, actually. So it's Syed Rasheed. Khalid is my my middle name, and usually that's not used. So if it's Syed Rasheed on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me at you can so, and from LinkedIn you can actually, it's linked to my email as well. So that is, I usually answer all the questions that I receive from LinkedIn. So if you want to connect there, and if you want to send me your questions through LinkedIn, that will be fine.
Okay, that's good.
I have a question. Can I ask a question from you guys?
Sure.
Whatever you have told so far in the whole slide, so can you summarize in just only two-liner or a three-line maybe, so that it would be easier for us to grasp what has happened in the last 40 minutes or so?
So in the last 40 minutes or so, we talked about 4 things. We talked about what is open source, and how it is different from proprietary software. We talked about how the open source, little bit of the business model around open source. And then we talked about how people can participate in the open source projects, and why they should actually think about doing that, what's in it for them. And we talked about, they have the opportunity to brand themselves, to become expert. Open source technologies is becoming very rapidly adopted in enterprises. So it opens up a lot of employment opportunities, a lot of consulting opportunities, as well as somebody's an entrepreneur, then they can actually build a software business based on open source. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Wasif bhai, do you have any questions?
Yeah, there was another question earlier, Khalid, that was asked, and the question was, why is Linux open source, and how does Red Hat supports it, and how does Red Hat makes money?
Yes. So why is Linux open source? Because people were sick and tired of being hostage to commercial vendors. IBM, HP, every big hardware vendor used to provide their own, and Microsoft used to provide their own proprietary operating systems. And that operating system, only they used to decide what features are going to go into the next version, which feature they will prioritize. And people were tired of it. It's like, they said, you know what, we can create an open source operating system on our own. And that's how the original Linux was started. It was started by one guy, Linux Stresswald, and there's tons of good documentary movies on YouTube that you can watch. But the guy said, look, I'm going to create my own software that I can control myself. And he started sharing that piece of software because he said, look, I'm one person, I can only do so much. If more people are looking at the piece of code and they are bringing their own critical view and they can make it better and enhance it, then guess what? It will become much, much better, much, much faster. And that's exactly what happened, that Linux took off. First thing that happens is all proprietary Unix systems, AIX, HPUX, Solaris, all those systems started getting replaced by Linux because Linux was able to run at the same speed, at the same on cheaper hardware, because Linux was, the original guys who started doing this. They said, look, we don't need proprietary hardware. We will run it on these
So
Intel-based
I want to
hardware.
ask something. So we have RTO system which are more speed. They have more speed than the Linux. So why not we use that RTO systems as OS?
Yeah. So the idea is definitely there are pieces of, there are more newer versions, more high performing versions. That's where the whole idea that I introduced, that if you are interested and you want to make feature requests, or you want to tell your Linux guys that, like, guys, this is a better system and this is how you should include it, then you should do that. The whole idea of open source is communities define the roadmap, not one organization, not few people, but community will define which features will be added, what how they want to prioritize which feature should be higher priority versus lower priority. So that's the whole beauty of open source, is that you can actually influence the product roadmap, the software roadmap, and you can influence that. And so if you feel joining, and that's exactly what I talked in the last piece of in the last introduction on how you can participate in open source. You can join the user group, you can join the blogs and forums, and you can present your idea and advocate for it, and see if, how people respond, and if they take you up on that.
Thank you, Khalid. Another question that was there was, how is Pakistan and the universities in Pakistan doing in terms in the overall contribution in open source? Is there any statistics that is generated, and is this Pakistan on the map at all, and the students and community from Pakistan there?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Wasif. Actually, I'm not. I don't have any statistics or anything about Pakistan itself.
Yeah, Khalid bhai, this is Iftikhar. I can probably help a little bit over
Sure.
here. So just hello everyone. I'm Iftikhar Khan. I just work with Khalid bhai over here. I'm also one of the Red Hat employee. I mostly work on a community side, so I lead the Ansible community over here. When you look at the overall contribution from Pakistan, it depends on project to project. But I can tell you, in one of the, if you look at the GitHub top 10 projects over there, we get stats of that, and a lot of these successful communities, they try to basically maintain a healthy contribution database to see where they are finding more contributors based on the interest level. And I can tell you, in most of the larger projects, we don't see a lot of contribution coming from Pakistan. Overall in APAC region, if I talk about mostly Japan, China is doing much well. India is ramping up over there. most of the open source contribution that you see is mostly coming from the US and the Eastern Europe side. It has been taking over. One of the reason is because, especially in the APAC region, people are still trying to figure it out. What is this open source and how do we get part of that thing? And most of the businesses are really trying to, get more tuned to open source, which has not been in their DNA. So it's an evolving thing, but I can say if you look at the population statistics based on the, Pakistan, our contribution are not very high over there. I do believe there's a huge potential in Pakistan, and it's just more of a awareness. People don't know how to get started contributing and how to build their brand name, because open source is all about brand name. You can establish your own brand name, and once you build that contribution portfolio, companies follow you and they want you to associate because you have your individual, just like you see on Instagram and all that. People have these influencer status. It's the same thing operates in the open source world. And once you are active in the communities, that's the best way to build that. And unfortunately, Pakistan is not that high on that thing. I can give you some stats from the Ansible community perspective from the Pakistan. Last time when I look at that thing, we were not even in the top 50 in terms of the countries.
Okay, thanks, Iftikhar. I think there are a couple of more questions. One question was that is open source vulnerable to hacking?
Any software is available for hacking. The whole idea of open source being more secure is because more people participate, code is available, more eyes are on it. So if any vulnerability gets surfaced up, people, there are more bodies that can actually that are available to, that actually contribute in fixing that bug, because that's what people take pride in. And this is again the whole idea of open source. Also think about, for individuals, it's about pride, it's about prestige, that I fixed the bug, I fixed this this virus or this vulnerability that was discovered by Black Hat organization or whoever. So that's the whole idea, that community eyes are on the piece of software. And that's why that piece of software is more robust, because more people are reviewing it, more people are testing it, more people are actually making it better. So that's the reason. But as far as what is open source completely safe from bugs or viruses or defects? No. But we find that actually open source process help address the vulnerabilities and bugs that get surfaced much more quicker because of the power of community.
Thanks, Khalid. I think there was
Hello,
one more
I have
thing.
a question from you guys. Can I ask a question from you guys?
I think we'll just wrap up now, and
Just a last question. Just a last question.
I mean, if you want to ask your,
I want to ask that